Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening the hood on, well, the engine of reality itself.
That's a big claim.
It is a big claim. We're taking on a concept that is older than science, it's bigger than philosophy, and yet it's so deeply personal. It's like this invisible architecture that builds every single moment of your life, from, your confidence in a meeting all the way to your bank balance.
Won't even how well you sleep tonight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to introduce this with a metaphor our sources use that I think is really powerful. It's the snowflake and the avalanche.
Okay.
So imagine you're watching a mountainside. It's winter. It's completely still. And a single, almost weightless snowflake just shifts on a branch.
Barely perceptible.
Light as air. You can't even see it. But its quiet movement nudges the snow right next to it and then the layer underneath it. And suddenly there's this momentum that builds and builds until, bam, a massive thunderous avalanche just barrels down the slope.
Right, from one tiny, tiny cause.
And here's the premise that is, as I said, both terrifying and really liberating. Could that sleepy thought that just drifts through your mind at breakfast,
Yeah.
that little spark of self-doubt, or maybe a quick flash of determination, could that be the snowflake, the invisible nudge that leads to a habit, then a pattern, and then a full-scale result that barrels into your career, your relationships, your health?
Well, according to our sources, the answer is a definitive yes. Every single time.
Every time.
Every time. That silent, invisible chain connecting that tiny, quiet input to the massive, visible outcome. That's what we're calling the law of cause and effect, or LCE for short. And it's a mechanism that's always on, whether you pay attention to it or not.
What really made this click for me was reading the author's personal story about this postmortem they did on a ruined business partnership.
Right.
It sounded painful, honestly, like rewinding security footage and seeing every single bad decision that, at the time, probably felt trivial.
But they weren't looking for one big explosion.
No, not at all. They were looking for the tiny nudges, the careless email sent in a rush, the defensive tone they always took during disagreements, even the late-night coffee that made them irritable the next day.
And each one of those felt like nothing in isolation.
Exactly. But you string them all together, and it's a perfect, unbroken trail of dominoes leading straight to that dead end.
And that detective work led to the single most empowering idea in this whole deep dive.
Which is?
If all those tiny unwanted causes, the thoughtless emails, the defensive tones, if they created that massive unwanted effect, then it stands to reason that different, tiny, intentional causes have to create a better effect.
It completely shifts your focus.
Immediately. You stop dwelling on the bad result, and you start designing the positive input. And that's our mission today. We've got a really comprehensive stack of sources here: philosophy, neuroscience, practical guides. Our job is to hand you a flashlight.
I like that.
We want to shine it right on those hidden mechanics under your daily life, show you exactly how to tinker with the machine so it starts producing the results you actually want.
Okay, so let's start by tackling the big cultural myth that LCE just completely demolishes, and that is the seductive idea of luck.
The lottery ticket narrative.
Totally. The overnight success story, the viral post that changes a life. Our culture loves this idea of chance because it whispers this idea that you don't really need to struggle, you just have to wait your turn.
And it's so psychologically comforting, isn't it? Because it lets you assign credit, or let's be honest, more often blame, to forces outside of your control.
Right. It wasn't my fault, it was just bad luck.
Exactly. You don't have to do the uncomfortable work of self-examination.
Yeah.
But LCE demands accountability. It says if you scratch the surface of any so-called lucky break or any unlucky fall, you will always find a chain of causes stretching way back.
Okay, but let me push back on that for a second. What about just genuine randomness? An unexpected global event, a freak technical bug that tanks a product launch. Does LCE just dismiss all unpredictability?
That's a really important question.
Right.
And no, it doesn't dismiss it. It reframes our relationship to it.
Right.
So you can't control the meteor that lands near your business.
Right.
But you absolutely control the causes you supplied beforehand. Did you have a business continuity plan? A diversification strategy? Did you build emotional resilience through past challenges? The random event is external, but its effect is radically altered by the causes you already put in place.
That makes perfect sense. The event is the variable, but your preparation is the cause that determines the outcome.
That's like,
So let's take the example of a musician who just explodes onto the charts. The media calls it an overnight miracle, a fluke. But if we pull back that curtain, what are we really seeing?
You're seeing a massive, massive collection of accumulated causes. You're seeing years of playing to empty rooms for no money.
Thousands of hours refining lyrics and chords. Brutal feedback sessions that they actually listened to and incorporated. A consistent, calculated social media strategy. Relentless emails to producers. You take away those causes, that sheer volume of effort, and the effect, the chart domination, it never happens.
So a relationship doesn't just shatter because of one big fight.
No. It shatters because of 1,000 tiny causes. The unspoken resentments, the skipped date nights, the half-hearted listening, all those tiny emotional withdrawals that you barely even notice at the time.
Every visible outcome is just the predictable result of seeds you've been planting or watering or maybe just completely neglecting.
Exactly. Which means the real power, the real leverage, is always at the beginning of the chain, not the end.
Okay, so let's go there. Let's find the beginning. Part 1, the first domino. Thoughts as the root cause.
Right. If every effect has a cause, we had to find the very first cause. Where does it all start? And the answer is it starts in the mind. The mind is the invisible engine. It's the starting line. It is the first domino. But why? I have so many fleeting thoughts every day. Why aren't they just, harmless mental fog that just dissipates?
Because the primary job of your nervous system is to be a translation device. That's all it is. It's designed to translate an intangible thought, an image, a belief, which is just pure potential energy, into physical reality.
Yeah.
Through muscular contractions, posture changes, the tone of your voice, visible behaviors. If your mind sends a signal of confidence, your shoulders pull back automatically. Your voice might drop half an octave. You make eye contact. And that subtle behavioral shift can dictate the entire outcome of a negotiation.
And this is where the neuroscience gets really, really cool, because we have the data now. We can see it on fMRI scans.
We can.
A thought, especially one with a strong emotional charge, isn't just floating around. It physically lights up neural networks in the frontal cortex.
But that's just the start of the chain reaction.
Right, because those networks then recruit the limbic system, the brain's emotional center, and that triggers a release of neurotransmitters. And these are not trivial chemicals.
No, they're the directors of your entire physiology. They change your heartbeat, your breathing, they change everything.
So if I say spend 5 minutes just vividly imagining a successful presentation, what's actually happening in my brain?
What's happening is your brain, which can't really tell the difference between vivid imagination and reality, starts firing neurons in the exact same motor regions that you will use during the real event.
It's like a rehearsal.
That's a full dress rehearsal.
Huh.
And that mental practice causes a little drip of dopamine into your system. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation, of seeking. So that tiny chemical nudge makes preparing your slides feel, well, it feels good. It feels desirable instead of like a chore you need to procrastinate on.
The thought was the microcause. The dopamine was the immediate effect, which then led to the action.
The chain is unbroken.
So let's flip that. What about the habit of catastrophic rumination? Playing disaster movies on a loop in your head.
Well, that immediately recruits the amygdala, the brain's fire alarm. And it floods your body with cortisol. It's preparing you for an emergency that doesn't actually exist.
And over time, that has to physically change the brain.
It does. It literally sculpts it. It reinforces and myelinates the pathways that are biased toward threat detection. So the person who is always thinking, people are going to let me down, is physically building a brain that is primed to find evidence of that.
So their own internal filter then dictates their outward behavior.
Of course. They become withdrawn or defensive or overly cautious. And those behaviors, ironically, are what drive other people away, which then fulfills the original prophecy they wrote in their own mind. The internal cause created the external effect.
And if you repeat those thoughts enough times, they're not just thoughts anymore, are they? They harden. They become beliefs.
Absolutely. Beliefs are the mind's operating software. They run in the background, mostly invisible, but they direct every single visible choice you make.
So a thought like, I could write a book, might just come and go.
It's just a flicker. But if you repeat it, if you start looking for evidence to support it, if you integrate it into who you are, it hardens into the belief, I am an author. And then your mind just automatically starts searching for data to match that program. You start noticing laptops on sale or a local writing class. You become living proof of your own belief.
The story about the author in grad school with math is just a perfect illustration of this.
It really is.
For years, they'd convinced themselves they were bad at math. It was based on, one bad algebra test in high school. But they treated that belief like it was an objective truth, like gravity.
And of course, their grades in the graduate level class reflected that belief perfectly. The belief was a granite wall. It blocked their access to their own cognitive abilities.
And the professor was smart. He didn't focus on the equations. He focused on the root cause, the belief.
Right. He had them do visualizations. Imagine breezing through the problems. Imagine feeling that click of understanding, picturing the A on the test.
So by replacing that one foundational cause, that one thought, I am bad at math, with a new one, they cracked the wall.
The physics didn't change. The math didn't change. But the internal operating software had a major update. And by the end of the semester, they scored near the top of the class. They changed the first domino, and the rest fell into a completely different pattern.
Which brings us to a really practical application here. If our minds are this good at planting these seeds, we need some sort of defense system.
We do. Our sources call it cognitive hygiene.
I love that term. Because thoughts are like seeds, and they're so susceptible to what the sources call mental pathogens.
Like negativity loops, doom scrolling, gossip, social comparison.
Right. You can't avoid every single germ out there, but you can, and you must, wash your hands.
And cognitive hygiene is that active process of washing your mental hands. The key practice here is intentionality, especially before you consume digital content. That's probably the biggest source of unwanted seeds in modern life.
So instead of just mindlessly opening a news app,
you set an intention first. It acts like a filter. For instance, before you research stocks, you consciously say to yourself, I am looking for information that empowers wise, long-term investing. I will ignore fear-based noise.
And that little bit of friction, that intention, acts as a filter that catches the clickbait and only lets the good data through.
Exactly. And then, this is crucial, you create mental bookends. When you're done, you consciously name a closing thought. Something like, I am equipped for growth and I trust my plan.
So you're preventing all that random data and emotional junk from planting seeds in that transition time between activities.
You're being the master gardener. You're not just letting the wind blow whatever it wants in your mind. You are choosing the cause.
Okay, so thought is the blueprint, but a blueprint doesn't build a house. You need action. That's the bridge from the intangible world of thought to the material world.
A thought is still just potential energy. It's a seed in a packet. It only becomes a result when you apply it through consistent daily action. You can think about writing a book all day, but if you never open the laptop, the effect is always going to be zero.
And this is where the engine of the compound effect really kicks in. Because LCE doesn't just track single events, it tracks accumulation. A tiny, trivial cause, when it's repeated consistently, becomes a monumental effect.
It's the difference between brushing your teeth for 2 minutes a day versus skipping it. Over 20 years, it's not one bad tooth. It's a catastrophe. Small, ordinary acts accumulate into extraordinary futures, for better or for worse.
The story about Darren, the graphic designer, was so relatable. He wanted to lose 30 pounds, but the goal just felt paralyzing.
Right, the friction was too high, so every time he tried to launch some massive, intense new plan, he'd fail in a couple of days.
So his coach did something brilliant. He ignored the big goal entirely and just focused on one single, tiny micro cause.
The only commitment was to put on his running shoes every morning. That was it.
Not even go for a run, just put on the shoes.
Just put on the shoes. That was the intentional seed. And for the first week, that's all he did. He'd lace them up, feel a little ridiculous, and then take them off.
But the neural pathway was already starting to form.
It was. And after doing that little shoe tying ceremony for 6 days, a new thought just naturally popped into his head. Well, the shoes are on. I might as well jog to the corner.
He just slightly reduced the friction. That one tiny action completely changed his future.
And 2 months later, he's running 3 miles consistently. The scale eventually dropped 28 pounds, but the real change was his identity. He went from being someone who struggles with exercise to a person who moves their body every day.
And this all has a biological basis, right? This isn't just psychology. Habits are physically stored in the brain.
They are. They're automated in a deep, ancient part of the brain called the basal ganglia. It's all about efficiency.
And this is the MIT rat study in the T-shaped maze.
Right. When they first put the rats in, their brains were lighting up everywhere. The conscious brain was working hard, processing all this new information.
But after a week,
the rats were just sprinting through the maze automatically, and their brain activity was almost silent, except for a little spike at the beginning, the cue, and at the end, the reward. The brain had offloaded the task. It built a cue, routine, reward loop.
And this frees up our conscious brain to do other things.
But it's a blessing and a curse, because the basal ganglia is ruthlessly impartial. It doesn't care if the habit is good or bad. It will store flossing just as efficiently as it stores nail biting.
So you can't really fight it head on. You have to work with the loop.
Exactly. You can't always remove the cue, like your phone buzzing, but you can change the routine that follows. You can upgrade the reward.
And speaking of architecture, this brings us to keystone habits. The idea that not all habits are created equal.
Some habits, once you install them, just cause this cascade of positive changes across your whole life. They stabilize the entire structure.
And the classic case study is Paul O'Neill at Alcoa, the aluminum company.
Right. The company was struggling. Everyone expected him to talk about profit margins. Instead, in his first speech, he talks about one thing: worker safety.
Which must have seemed so random.
It did, but here's why it was genius. To make every worker safe, they had to fundamentally redesign everything: manufacturing processes, communication between shifts, information flow, machinery. Everything had to be upgraded.
So that single keystone habit safety forced all these other positive changes.
It created massive secondary effects. Injuries plummeted, of course. But unexpectedly, quality went up, efficiency soared, and costs went down. Alcoa's market value quintupled. He found the one habit that made all the other good habits inevitable.
What's so critical here, and I think so hard for people to accept, is the patience this requires. The timeline for the result almost never matches the timeline of the cause.
Never. When you start something new, a new skill, a fitness plan, the first few weeks, even months, feel totally futile. You're putting in 100% effort and seeing maybe 1% change.
This is the Chinese bamboo tree analogy.
It's the perfect analogy. The farmer waters and fertilizes this seed for 4 straight years and sees absolutely nothing above the ground.
4 years of nothing.
Total silence on the surface. And then in the 5th year, it erupts. It shoots up 90 feet in 6 weeks.
And we're tempted to say it grew in 6 weeks.
But that's a complete misunderstanding of LCE. It grew for 5 years. The first 4 were all about building a massive, invisible root network. The results were accumulating, just underground.
And that flat part of the curve, where the effort is high and the results are invisible, the sources call that the valley of disappointment.
That's where almost everyone quits. They misinterpret the silence as failure, when really they're just inches away from the roots taking hold and the whole thing taking off.
Which proves the rule that consistency will always outrank intensity.
Always. The biology of habit formation, this process called myelination, where your brain insulates neural pathways, that only happens through repetition, not one big burst of effort.
Doing 20 push-ups every single day is so much better than one heroic 6-hour gym session once a month.
It's not even close. The daily repetition is what transforms you. And that was proven in that University of Florida photography class study.
Right. They split the class into 2 groups.
One group was graded purely on the quantity of photos they submitted. 100 photos got you an A. The other group was graded on producing just one single perfect photo.
And the results?
The quantity group produced by far the higher quality photos. It wasn't even close.
Why?
Because they were forced to practice every day, to iterate, to fail fast, to learn. They were compounding their skill through consistent action. The internal accounting of LCE only really cares about those small daily deposits.
Okay, so we've established the cause starts with a thought, which becomes a habit, which is an action. But these things don't happen in a vacuum, right? They ripple out.
They absolutely do. Which brings us to the social and environmental amplifiers. Your actions, your habits, they send out a signal. An energetic signature that gets picked up and amplified by the people and places around you.
Let's define energy here, because it can sound a little bit vague.
It's not vague at all. In this context, energy is the measurable composite of your emotional frequency, your physiological charge, and your core intention. Your inner state is not private. It's broadcasting publicly, 24/7.
And we have the science to back this up. The Heart Math Institute, for example, has shown the heart generates a powerful electromagnetic field that extends several feet outside the body.
It's a literal physical signal. And then you have mirror neurons. Neuroscientists have confirmed we are biologically wired to pick up and reflect each other's inner states.
So when a leader walks into a room feeling calm and confident,
the mirror neurons in everyone else's brain start firing in a similar pattern. Their own nervous systems begin preparing to match that state. It's a form of unconscious entrainment.
That's incredible. So my internal state is actually sending out molecules, like nitric oxide when I'm optimistic, that literally signals safety to the people around me.
Precisely. And the reverse is true. A state of anxiety signals danger. A leader holding a coherent emotional field doesn't just influence their team. They can literally entrain the nervous systems of the entire group.
Which brings us to social gravity, and man, it pulls hard.
We are tribal creatures. At a deep, primal level, we calibrate our choices to stay within the safety of the group. We fear isolation more than we fear stagnation.
And the Framingham Heart Study is the shocking proof of this.
It's unbelievable. They found that if a close friend becomes obese, your own risk of obesity goes up by 57%.
57%.
Regardless of how far away they live. That's a statistical correlation that shows social gravity is often stronger than genetics or even personal willpower.
So our friends, our family, they're like social moons that determine the tides of our choices.
They are. And this isn't about outsourcing responsibility or blaming your friends. It's about recognizing causality. You are responsible for choosing the causes, the relationships that create your environment.
The sources say relationships act as a funhouse mirror.
It's a perfect description. They reflect back an image of yourself that dictates your level of self-permission. If your circle treats ambition like it's a character flaw, you will subconsciously dim your own light to maintain harmony.
The anecdote about the copywriter was fascinating. He was known for these bold, eggy ideas.
Yeah, until a new creative director came in. And she never once criticized him directly. She just used these subtle, nonverbal cues. A skeptical eyebrow, a soft sigh, a pause that was just a little too long.
Tiny, subtle causes.
But incredibly powerful. His unconscious mind registered the threat. Risk equals social rejection. And within 3 months, his work was completely safe, completely committee approved. His talent hadn't changed, but the funhouse mirror told him to play small, and his results obeyed that silent command.
So if people are the amplifiers, then our physical and digital environment, that's the silent partner in all of this.
Environment design is the art of choreographing cues so that the path of least resistance aligns with your goals. It's about minimizing friction.
Like the author's desk makeover.
Exactly. Their desk was cluttered with books, bills, cords. Just a minefield of distractions. Every one of those objects was a tiny negative cause saying, you should deal with me instead.
It required so much willpower just to sit down and focus.
But when they cleared everything off, just the laptop, water, and an outline, the environment became a cocoon for creation. The visual field was calm. It signaled to the brain, this space has one purpose.
And their daily word count went from 800 to 2,400.
With zero extra discipline. The external cause, the clear desk, did all the heavy lifting by simply removing the competing cues.
And the same logic applies to our digital environment, maybe even more so.
Absolutely. The practical tip was to uninstall all social media apps from the phone and put the writing tools on the home screen dock.
So the cue is still there, the phone buzzes, but when you unlock it, you're greeted with tools for creation, not distraction.
You're increasing the friction for destructive habits and decreasing it for constructive ones. If you really want to check Instagram, you now have to open a browser, type in the URL, log in. It's just enough hassle that your brain often decides it's not worth it.
And this leads to the power of default settings.
So powerful and so underappreciated. Defaults have this incredible sway over us because our brains are wired to prefer the path of least resistance. Changing a default requires effort.
So when you change a default, you're making one high-effort decision that then automates better choices forever.
It's the ultimate front-loaded cause. The classic example is the automated savings plan at work. You sign one form, one time, and from then on, the default is saving. Spending that money becomes the action that requires extra effort.
Or changing your TV's default setting. Instead of launching straight into a streaming service, have it default to a blank screen or a piece of art.
Right. Consumption now requires a conscious, intentional click. You've protected thousands of future minutes of your attention with one single cause.
Okay, so once we get good at planting positive causes, what's the next level? How do we achieve mastery?
Mastery requires a shift from being a passive observer to being an active detective. You have to be willing to go back to the scene of the crime, so to speak, and investigate the true underlying causes, not just the obvious suspects.
And this is the timeline technique.
Yes. You start with the result you don't want, let's say it's chronic financial stress, and you walk it backward. You map out every event, action, and emotion that connects to it.
The example of the reader with the credit card debt was so powerful.
It was. She traced her debt back to specific shopping sprees, but then she traced the sprees back to what triggered them. Usually a fight with her mother or a romantic rejection.
So it wasn't about budgeting.
Not at all. She went even further back and found the original emotional wound, a painful breakup years earlier that left her with this deep feeling of abandonment. And shopping had become her form of anesthesia.
So the belief was, I heal abandonment through consumption.
Exactly. Buying the shoes was never about the shoes. It was about patching that core wound. And once she saw that pattern, she could finally address the real cause, not just the symptom. She found the fork in the road.
And once you see that fork, you have to figure out how to break the cycle, which is hard because these cycles are biologically reinforced.
They are. They're perpetuated by two things. Neuromyelin, which is like insulation that makes the reaction super fast and automatic.
And dopamine.
And dopamine, which gives you that little reward of relief when you give in to the bad habit. The whole system is rigged for repetition.
So you can't fight it when it's at full speed.
You can't. The solution is the micro shift. You identify the point of maximum momentum and you insert a tiny wedge. For the author, the cycle was chronic overwork.
Driven by the belief, my worth equals my utility.
Right. So his micro shift was simple. Shut the laptop at 7 p.m., no exceptions. He didn't have to meditate or read a book. Just stop the physical action.
And I bet his brain screamed in protest at first. The guilt, the anxiety.
It howled. It tried to pull him back onto that comfortable, myelinated path. But the world didn't end. And that one simple, consistent interruption broke the hypnotic power of the cycle. It started to build a new neural highway.
And this all leads to what our sources call the master key of LCE, which is radical responsibility.
This is so often misunderstood as blame. It's not. The second you stop blaming external forces and you adopt the stance that everything in my life is a result of causes I can influence, you step out of victimhood and into authorship.
Responsibility isn't blame, it's authority.
It's authority. It's owning the fact that your signature is on every contract between cause and effect. And if you're the author, you also get to write every single rewrite.
This is Viktor Frankl and the concentration camps.
The ultimate example. He wrote about that space between stimulus and response. He couldn't control the horrific stimulus, but he could always choose his response, his interpretation, his inner cause.
And there's a neurological benefit to this stance.
There is. Taking radical responsibility shifts brain activity from the reactive, threat-detecting amygdala to the problem-solving prefrontal cortex.
The CEO of the brain.
Exactly. The simple belief that your choices matter literally switches on the parts of your brain associated with planning and innovation. You are chemically and structurally optimizing your brain for success.
So, you accept authorship, you plant the right causes, and then you have to deal with the time lag. You have to endure what we call the dark zone.
That flat part of the curve.
Yeah.
This is where you have to master the paradox of urgency and patience.
Explain that.
You must plant your causes with urgency, consistently, diligently, every day. That's the urgent action. But you must allow them to mature on their own schedule. That's the patient expectation, trusting the bamboo roots.
So how do you stay patient and not quit in that dark zone?
You shift what you're tracking. You focus on process metrics, not just outcome metrics.
So instead of obsessing over the number on the scale,
You track the number of workouts completed. Instead of the revenue goal, you track the sales calls made. The process metrics give you instant validation for your effort, which reinforces the habit loop long enough for time to work its magic.
so if we pull all of this together, the intentional thought, the consistent habit, the environment, the responsibility, what does true mastery look like day to day?
It's the continuous practice of a triad: awareness, alignment, and adjustment.
Awareness is just noticing.
It's non-judgmental observation. Noticing the subtle cues in your environment. Noticing the intrusive thoughts. If you don't see the snowflake fall, you can't stop the avalanche.
And alignment.
Alignment is consciously choosing to point every thought and action towards your core values. It's asking the question, what would I still do even if nobody was watching or applauding? The answer to that question reveals your most powerful, authentic causes.
And finally, adjustment.
Adjustment is treating failures and setbacks not as judgments on your character, but as data. Pure and simple. You measure the result of your cause, you compare it to what you intended, and then you refine your approach. You become a learning system.
Okay. We've gone deep into the law of cause and effect.
We have. And if there's only one thing you take away from all of this, let it be this core truth. Life is not happening to you. It is responding to you. Every victory, every setback, every single brick in the wall of your life was placed there by something you once decided.
So the goal now is to move this from just an idea you think about to a daily choreography, a practice. So here's a challenge. Make one single small change in your environment today that removes friction for a good cause.
Put the fruit bowl on the counter at eye level.
Exile the social media apps off your phone's home screen. Just put your laptop in a drawer at 7 o'clock tonight. Plant one clean cause today.
And just remember that struggle, when it's applied consistently toward a positive cause, will eventually compound and become ease. Your patience in that valley of disappointment will be rewarded.
And finally, don't forget the ripple effect. This personal practice of LCE is really a form of public service. Your internal shift, your calm, your focus, your energy, it radiates out. It influences everyone around you.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take with you. If you look at the 3 most frustrating results in your life right now, in your health, your career, or your relationships, what is the single persistent invisible cause that you need to find the courage to stop supplying? And what powerful microscopic cause must you plant in its place today?